Okay. All right. So
Okay, Kai. What are we doing in an IKEA?
so we're doing a test for our joint vlog channel, and we're still figuring that out. And I'm Kai. I am a 50 plus, first timer on YouTube.
I'm Steve. I might be 50 plus.
First time on YouTube as well.
I don't know. I think there's a few things on YouTube. I've posted on YouTube. I don't know if I have been on YouTube.
Oh, okay. So first time, like first person, maybe. Yeah. So today's topic we wanted to, I guess, just have like a really candid conversation about is the word community, and that is sort of what brought us together in thinking about using YouTube as a platform to help create community for others, but also for ourselves. We thought it'd be fun to kind of share a little backstory of how we became friends and a community of two, and sort of explore what the different meanings of that might be and what it could look like. So,
Okay, so hold it.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do this so that it's like obvious that this is happening real. We're actually in an IKEA in Richmond.
Yes.
This is happening. Why? What's the deal with an IKEA?
Yes. So the reason I thought it was
Because I'm not comfortable right now.
Yeah. Well, so part of it is that I feel like, I don't know about you, but for me, my purpose in terms of what I want to do is help people navigate uncertainty and getting over with discomforting things, such as loud noises in the background. So that's a challenge. But I thought it appropriate being an IKEA because IKEA in itself, all around the world, has this sort of built-in sense of community. People that love IKEA products, or in my instance here, in the clip that Steve had just took or showed, is that in the IKEA, this is IKEA Richmond out in west coast of Canada, there is a whole sort of more cafe side to it where it's quieter, where there's quite a few, I would say, solo entrepreneurs or maybe students that come here to work out of this space actually, and IKEA pretty much leaves us to be. I mean, I've worked here for like 8 hours straight before. Food's reasonable and cheap, so that's another bonus. And it gives a sense of like there's other people around. So the funny part is, yeah, we're hearing what's going on in the background, so try not to be distracted and also facing our own discomforts with doing something very public in a public space.
In a weird place, but strangely not.
It feels safe,
Yeah.
right? Generally speaking.
A lot of people have left, so it's
Yeah.
easier.
So it's a little easier. Yes. What else is there?
Yeah. So we started to tell the story of. Did we start to tell the story of where we met?
We haven't yet.
No, okay. Yeah. The year was.
Oh my gosh.
Was it 2020?
Yeah, it
middle of
was
COVID.
2020. 2 weeks into the announcement of a pandemic, COVID pandemic. And for me, it was through an ad hoc community that formed online on Slack because I knew someone that is also a community builder and has been for many years. So he kind of pulled all the contacts together and invited us to a Slack channel. Is that how did you join the Slack channel?
I think
too?
so, yeah.
Yeah, so you were pulled in somehow.
Yeah.
So I think there were, and I'll say a ragtag team of like 200 that got pulled in We didn't really know what it was about other than, hey group, let's meet to try to figure out how to build community. There was one in-person meeting right before the pandemic was announced. That was kind of like let's just meet and get to know one another and see what happens. And it was called Shift Disturbers, which was a fun play on word for what it sounds like. And then 2 weeks into the pandemic, the first formal call went out, and there was a request from a nonprofit executive director of a downtown Eastside organization calling for help to help our most vulnerable population in a certain part of downtown Vancouver. Can you add more to that?
Nope.
No?
Just that, yeah. I had joined this online. Yeah, went to this event. Shift Disturbers sounds interesting. Joined the online Slack community.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter, let's do something about. This call has gone out. Who wants to do something? And I remember being like, I'm not doing anything else. It's COVID.
Yeah.
So
Lockdowns was just announced too. So
went on that first. They just convened a Zoom call for whoever showed up.
It was very last minute too. I remember it was just like, oh, okay,
And it was from that Shift Disturbers. There was a few people, and it was just like this mishmash of people who just showed up on this Zoom call.
Yes.
With really no idea why we were there, even.
Other than that,
nobody knew anybody.
There was a community asked for help, and what could we, as a community of people interested in shifting, coming together. And then I actually had arrived to the meeting late because it was so last minute. I think I found out that day, or I saw the email notification that day, and I was like, oh my God. So I joined late, so I actually missed the whole original ask. So I had to catch up in the space of not knowing what the heck it was about. And turned out it was, I believe, civil, I can't remember, community planner for civic spaces. I think that's what it was. Had received an email from this executive director of a nonprofit saying, oh my God, we have X many people, haven't even had time to think it through, but with the lockdown, they have no access to the basics of what we would have access to, such as soap for hand washing, because that was the first thing identified. We need sanitization, needing masks, and there was no supply for them, no way to access because everything was shut down, to no funding. And all the government services were shutting down. So now we have a population that need the support, that have been on the support, with community services also being cut off completely, abruptly. Understandably so, but there was no contingency plan whatsoever. And of course, people are like, well, the government will come up with something. But as we know, with large systems like that, it takes time. So there was this dire sense of urgency. Yeah.
And it was, what I remember is on the ground activists who are with people every day who saw how bad it was, who were just like, we just have to do something.
Yeah.
And then people who represented organizations who wanted to help and had to think about things like legal responsibility and what if we're creating more harm than good, and we need to know these things.
Yeah.
And so there was people were seeing two different worlds, but they had come together to do something about this situation.
Yeah.
And it was forming that we formed nonprofit organization within a month, is what I remember.
Or I would say nonprofit, I guess organization, not a legal entity, but just an organization, like grassroots.
Organization.
So that meeting that night was, we're still not sure what we need to do, but we need someone to lead this. And there were no one had stepped up. It was very palpable that there was a sense of life or death for some of these folks, being that we were all afraid, but we were safely staying in place at home. We had a home. We had access to soap. We could get masks or stay home and have food, the luxury of that, where many people didn't. So that for me was just like, oh my God, like this is really life or death. And at the time I was underemployed. I thought, if there's no one else, I felt this like panic almost. It's just like no one else. So I actually put my hand up, not having not a clue what I was getting myself into, saying, I can help for now just to get it going. That's all I had intended. Then the next, I would say 3 days, whirlwind of me ending up that meeting, figuring out who is that I need to talk to. The main person making the ask on behalf of the community. I had to basically put on my design strategist hat and start defining, like, what is the problem, what is the need, who is it we're helping, who it is that can help, like what are the possibilities, even with all the limitations we had with how do we keep ourselves safe, how do we keep other people safe. And like Steve mentioned, there was a lot of...
No one agreed on the answer to any of those questions.
And there was also the politics and the bureaucracy. Because of the two sides, we had, I would say, the more frontline group, which is like, don't care what the government's going to do. They're not fast enough. We're going to do it our way. And then there's me wearing the project manager's hat of like, oh God, no, we can't do that because we want to work in partnership with the public bodies because this has to be sustainable and long term. So I realized like I had to be that in between, not quite mediator, I don't know what the right, I think it was Steve that brought up like conductor of orchestrating, giving space to one and empowerment, but also connecting in the background, connecting to the governing bodies that needed to be connected to. Neither wants the other to be involved in a way, so then trying to balance that delicately, which truthfully, I did have some days with a lot of tears because I found that really difficult. How to balance that, because I knew, yes, lives actually could be at stake, right? Pushing ahead, activism means well, but it puts jeopardy because then ego and emotion is overrun, and doing things in a rush isn't the way. But also waiting for weeks with nothing also isn't the answer. So like, how do we do something that doesn't exist? And through that second day, I realized, oh my God, I need to put a team together. So out of all the people who showed up to that first meeting, only a few hands went up. Steve was one of them. And I remember clearly, like, I think he left me a message. It's like, I don't know how I can be of help, but I can offer help as a thought partner, like bouncing ideas off, someone to talk to. And I'm like, done. And then I realized, okay, the needs that we determine are, they need soap, they need hygiene products, they also need hand sanitizer, first aid, and also cleaning for all the low-income housing and facilities that they still had, at least, where residents can at least figure out with some facilitation by the nonprofit groups on the ground to kind of at least maintain some system or new ways of doing for the meantime, while the government has to figure out to tell us like what needs to be done, what's safe, what's not safe. Like we were all scrambling. So then we brought on, so I realized, yeah, we needed that. How are we going to get that? We need money. And two, everybody's like, we can just get people to donate. Yes, except how do we keep that clean and not then contaminate volunteers? How do we do that at a distance safely? How do we store the stuff when we're not supposed to go anywhere? So yeah, there was a lot of moving parts that I think myself and then a couple others who pulled in, it's like we had to think ahead to mitigate as best we could. I mean, I am by no means a emergency, coordinator or triage, but that was the role I didn't realize at the time I stepped into. So
yeah,
and
didn't know what we were getting into.
Yeah, so that's how we met.
And it was I said to some people, it was like building an airplane as it's taking off from the runway. So it was
I love that.
I mean,
analogy.
we could say more about that. I like leaving a gap.
Yeah, I feel
there was
like,
a lot that happened.
Yeah, there's a lot, which that could be another
so we can
episode.
skip. We can skip.
Yeah, we can skip ahead.
It was super intense.
Yeah. Well, do we even want to give the results? Or do we want to leave that as a cliffhanger? I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a separate thing. So what came of that is because Steve and I were able to, I think, have like, is it tete-a-tete? The French word. These sort of conversations, and I'll say like vulnerable conversations. I mean, I think there's like times I'm just like, oh my God, I need to cry. I need to, I feel the stress. And I realized I didn't need to take it on, but realistically, who wouldn't feel the stress of it? Because yeah, some points of that was feeling really like on an island of one, trying to manage two groups with they have different purpose and different requirements. And me in this situation, we're all trying to figure out pandemic and handling our own stresses in our own way. So Steve and I essentially began this community of two within this container of, we started a response, or I guess I did start a response. I didn't realize it turned into be something of a fundraiser and community response and all of that. So yeah, that's another story. But since then, we've continued our friendship. In this community of two, we somehow managed to meet. I think in the beginning, when that was done, it was like we all needed a break, but we kept in touch. It was like once every 2 months. Sometimes it was once every month. And then the last, I would say 2 years now, I think, right? It's been, we've been actually a lot more consistent despite we still had not met each other in real life.
In person.
Yeah. And two, Steve moved away. So we weren't even on the same time zone for how long now? How long have you?
Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
A little over a year and a half.
Okay, so it's been quite a while. So we've managed to actually meet consistently more since Steve has moved to Japan. And continuing work that he is called to do, which is still community related, and me also, but in a different, I guess, context. And so, and yet we find ourselves still in the same place of feeling we are like-souled or like-minded souls, and we know that there are others out there. There's not as many of us, just like have similar interests, similar values, and feeling that we wanted to build that community because this community of people that are like-minded or like-souled feel a calling to make the world a better place with what we have, not focusing on what's not going well and the limitations, but focusing on what's available and what's possible, irregardless of location or time, I feel like.
Yeah.
So
And I think in talking about what are we going to talk about? What we would like to talk about? And community makes sense. Like as we're talking about how we met. And because the reason I was in the downtown east side was because of a community that I was a part of that really changed me. I became who I was through this community, through traveling with all kinds of folks, but Indigenous folks, and really getting in touch with Indigenous spirituality and what that was and what it meant, and really letting go of doing things for people and instead doing things with people. With, not for, is, it's a simple little phrase, but it was a journey, and that was because of community.
Yeah.
So whatever that meant. And then there was this weird thing that formed, and that was a community, and then there was this community within that of the two of us, and then I'm in Japan, and I'm an artist in residence, and I'm like, I think I'm done with community, because I was kind of burned out after a lot of community organizing, grassroots organizing, which just means without money. And I end up, my art becomes about engaging with community and about creating space and holding space for artists and people in the program I'm part of, but also the surrounding community. And then that morphs into how can art help serve communities, and how can art help restore and heal socially and ecologically and economically regions. Not just a little neighborhood, but big areas. And I don't know how I ended up there. It's like, I don't know how I ended up there, but then I do, because it's all about community. And that's always a thread through everything. So
also finding your own sense of community too is part of that. I think, some of us might call it finding our tribe, finding people that share the same similar values and interest. I think that, brought you there too. Like when you mentioned, doing the art and community, the word shared conversations come up. And I'm like, oh, that's actually a thread for us, right? Is having these shared conversations. And I also had the similar experience of, I hosted, facilitated, organized a couple of communities for years and got completely burnt out because I was doing it more although I was doing it with, but it was also, again, volunteering. And I hadn't really figured out how to put a value to that, even though I essentially gave it away a lot. Learned my lesson, which is why we're both sort of in our own learning. This is our growth project too, of how do we serve with community, but also provide value for ourselves. And that in turn will generate value for everyone in a much healthier and sustainable way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Healthier and sustainable.
Yeah.
And this feels very much like that first Zoom call where I don't really know what we're doing and what's happening.
Exactly.
And who will see this and why, what are we doing again?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it makes crazy sense somehow. And you can't...
Don't know if you heard that.
Can't know until you start.
Yeah.
And just try something.
Yes.
Even though it seems mildly insane, and I can't imagine anyone actually listening to this. And at the same time, there's people who care about community, know that it's messy and confusing, and how does it go, and trying to work within that with community can be tiring, and sometimes you find yourself isolated, and who do you talk to about it? So I don't know. I think the impulse is, there's there must be other people out there who
Well, the fact that
have
we
an
know
equally
there
insane
are,
story.
right, as in the two of us, and we keep meeting other people that are in similar, and I have people coming back from my previous communities like, are you going to host something again? And me not having felt ready for a few years, post coming out of the pandemic, going through my own personal, I think, life transition challenges. I just knew that I needed to focus on my own journey for a while. And finally, I feel ready. And like Steve and I had talked about this on and off over the entire time we've known each other. So now I think, I don't know where you're at. Like, I feel ready. And so I feel like we're now on this, I don't know, there's momentum. If that's the right word.
We're building the airplane as it's taking off.
Yeah.
Again.
with less life or death attached to it. And part of the reason too for community is coming back to the word shared conversation. Shared conversation is where we connect. This is where we get to divulge our own learnings and insights, sharing with others. In fact, helping others to come to their own realization. So we learn together. If you think back, so another word for community, like I said, conversation, shared conversation. What's that? It's like storytelling, campfire. So all of these words, they're tied. And that's kind of what I feel like is at the nucleus of what we're hoping to form somehow. Right now, we're, I would say, a live work in progress, an online version because we are distance yet together. That's a word that I remember using back in the pandemic, distance yet together. I want to continue that somehow, even though we're not forced, but just through, I think, modern lifestyle, many people are distant. Like I realize when we think community, we think external, but what about like families and friends, right? They're also a form of community or a culture or a system. But community is usually the one you choose. Family, you don't necessarily get to choose. Well, the blood relations. I have my own chosen family, I call them, right? There's a small group. Like Steve is part of that. It's just a small handful. It's like, how can we expand on that and create more, I like to call it create more light in this world. If people want to go that route, you might think Star Wars, there's light and dark, or in the world I'm in, coaching, when I coach clients, it's like, there's the shadow work where there's stuff that experience we've had that brings out the negative feelings, the shadow work. And then when you get past that or get through that, work through it, light comes through. And we operate at a different frequency. We feel lighter, we feel more connected, and that has a ripple effect. So that is also part of why we keep coming back to building this community of more light.
Building it being a work in progress, very much in progress, because we don't know who it's for or what it is exactly, but that there's something there. So we have just us conversing.
Yeah,
it's more of an idea, and
I have a prototype happening already, and I have like specific, I say like subgroups or smaller communities specific. But what the bigger picture is what I don't know. And it's same as how we first met. It's like, I know there's specific needs, so let's address that and then see what happens. Be able to step back and see, oh, this is what it actually needs to be. And part of that is being informed by the community members, right? Like those we are collaborating with and co-creating with. So I think letting it naturally, organically inform us, as long as we all know the purpose and values, creating more light.
Be in conversation with the people, with the community. And I like that. I like the conversation came up because the project I'm doing, Cocoa Garden, I call it a conversation garden. So we're growing conversations and thinking of conversations as art. So yeah, maybe that's our next question. What is community simply conversation? Is it more complicated? What else does it need? I like the connection between community and conversation, and especially online communities. How are they more than conversations? I don't know. I don't know the answers, Kai. It's just an interesting question.
I don't think there is really a lot of times there's no exact solution. So in terms of answer, I just know that what human beings, and as when myself, know that we need meaningful interactions and engagements to bond, to feel a part of something. That's just human nature. And to do that is to be together somewhere. It doesn't have to be physical, although there's components that we do need. But to be together, and you can be in the space of not talking. So like virtual co-working, for example, something I hosted all throughout the pandemic and then stopped doing because once everybody got sick of online, but now people are coming back to it. There are actually specific apps and communities that are just for co-working now, which is like amazing. But I wanted to be more focused, more organized than that. So togetherness is one, but then how you really bond is through storytelling, which is conversations, right? So I feel like there's a nonverbal connection, and then there's also the spoken connection where you're not just together, but you actually start to have empathy and understanding, and that creates a much deeper impact than by being physically together and not talking even. So, or even if you were together and talking, but if it's not cultivated in a certain way, to say a lot of nothing. Yeah. So,
I'm interested to see where it all goes.
Me too. So we thought we'd do this piece, and then we'll throw up a link for if you're interested to find out more, to join a wait list so that when we do know more, or as we develop, we can get updates. You can drop a comment and let us know what has caught your attention or what resonates with you, or what have you been looking for. Like if you feel like, hey, these are my kind of people, like they're my tribe, let us know. And then what you feel would be really supportive and meaningful for you to feel a sense of community that doesn't have to be in physical togetherness. We would love to hear what other people have thoughts about. And who knows?
Doesn't have to be in IKEA.
Yeah. So we happen to be in IKEA because this is our second time meeting in person, because Steve is actually visiting Vancouver, visiting home, or visiting the Vancouver home, I should say.
Yeah, one of my homes.
Yeah. So we thought it's appropriate to actually do our first podcast, I don't know, video, actually together.
Whatever this is.
Yeah. But all the future ones, majority of them will be actually remote. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's all very interesting.
Right. So we get to see our experiment, a year from down the road, starting from our first one, how this has, what has transpired. Yeah. know.
I have a feeling my current feeling is it has nowhere to go but up. But that's just me.
Fantastic. Yay. Anyway, if you stayed till the end, thank you so much. We hope that something has resonated or maybe even gave you some insight into something you have been thinking about or feeling, anything really, anything of value. That's kind of the purpose of wanting to share this, even though it seems like I don't know what we're doing either, but we're trying it. So yeah, yay to creative
endeavors.
Prototyping. My prototyping at its best. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
I'll keep waving while you turn it off.
Oh,